So with me, I have Deepa Mehta and Terry Zwigoff. And one of the reasons I'm very proud that they're with us today is that these are definitely not for hire directors. These are directors who, from the beginning, have directed films they're passionate about and films that are personal to them. They are also have made films that have been nominated for Oscars. In Terry's case, Ghost World in 2002 was nominated for Best Screenplay based on material previously published. And in Deepa's case, her film Water in 2007 was nominated for Best Foreign Film. So before I mention something else, Terry, I understand you're going to tell us what the motivation for filmmaking is.
I can tell you my own motivation for filmmaking.
You go for it.
About anybody else's, but let's see. Besides a paycheck, you mean? You know, what you said about personal films is, you know, I'm not really a journeyman director, so I try to make personal films. And I guess the first film that had an impact on me as a kid was, they used to show these W.C. Fields films on television in Chicago when I was growing up all the time, and there was a film that came on called It's a Gift, which I thought was one of the funniest films ever made, probably the funniest film. And they showed it quite a bit, and I was very fascinated with that film because it had a vision of family life that seemed very truthful to me, and a type of thing that you would never see on TV on Father Knows Best or Leave It to Beaver. You'd never see it depicted in the movies or magazines. It was a very subversive film. And I don't know, there was something about that that I kept returning to and sort of influenced my own work, and you know, it just having some sort of connection with people, because I myself was so alienated, still am to some degree, where if I saw something in somebody else's film that I could connect with, it was a very powerful experience for me and very rare experience. But that was one of the films, and later there were films, usually they were about alienation, like 5 Easy Pieces, something like that, you know, with Jack Nicholson, that I thought, oh, here's finally a film where I can, you know, grab a hold of some truth. Or, you know, a Woody Allen film where I think it's Manhattan or Annie Hall, where he's telling Diane Keaton that the world is divided into 2 types of people. There's the miserable and there's the horrible, you know. And the miserable are, you know, most people, and then the horrible are, you know, if you're blind or, you know, you're dying or something like that. So that was sort of the motivation, to find some way to make some connection, you know, some personal connection.
Do you have a motivation, Deepa, before we get really serious?
No, I think that nothing comes to mind except I keep on feeling right now, maybe because I'm extremely tired after having just finished a film, that I must be a sucker for punishment. You know, that's the only thing that comes to mind. Why would anybody want to go through this process that's so grueling? And then you do it and you work for 3 years and you put it together, and you have to give up smoking, and you know, and you have to go to the gym, and you have to focus, and you finish, and then it's done, and then you start another journey, which is people throwing bouquets at it, or brickbats, and you say, why did you do it? I don't know. So at this point, I think it must be because I'm a masochist.
Okay, so we have punishment. We have punishment, terrible people, and horrible people. So we can only go up from here. So to kick off, Luis Buñuel, the film director, wrote the best autobiography, in my opinion, of a filmmaker. And I understand you've read it too, called The Last Sigh. And although I recommend this book for every reason, I'm mentioning it now because in this book, he writes about how good films have universal themes, but are very specifically rooted in a certain time and a certain place. And because emotions are universal, to have characters like that means anyone can understand them. And I think that's very much the case with both Deepa's and Terry's features and documentaries. While Deepa's features and her doc tackle worldwide issues, but focus very specifically on certain communities in Canada and India. And in Terry's case, choosing subjects with the universal issue of the struggle that it is to be an artist, but these people are also rooted in very specific areas of American soil. So with that in mind, starting with docs, Deepa, you had already tackled the subject of domestic violence in several films. So I was interested to see that you also did it in your documentary. Why did you revisit it in a new form when you'd really taken it by the balls already?
In fact, the documentary came before the feature film.
This is the doc. Let's talk about it.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And I was approached by a women's group to do the documentary, to ask me if I was interested in doing it. And it's basically about immigrant women and domestic violence in Canada. So it intrigued me, and after doing a lot of research, I decided that I would take. It just seemed, it seemed to be ghettoizing it if I just did Indian women. So I wanted to make it broader. And so we ended up by doing, white folks and black and yellow. And that is what it's all about. Domestic violence does not know any color. It does not know any national boundaries. And it was important for me that we didn't sort of ghettoize it. And that, after I finished doing the documentary, I decided to do a feature. So it was the other way around. Yeah.
And I think even that it's very different being an immigrant who's being abused. I mean, the rest of us can just say, well, go to this association, that association. But if you were in Bolivia or Korea or somewhere and this was happening to you, it wouldn't be so easy and obvious what to do. And so I was glad that you touched on that as well. Now, Terry, in your docs, first, Louis Bluey, I understand that was supposed to be a magazine article?
Right. It was I wasn't really a filmmaker at the time, and I collected old records from the 20s, these old 78s, these 10-inch shellac records. If anybody out there has any, let me know after the show. And I found this one blues record from the early 30s with the artist's name was only credited to a guy named Louis Bluey, which was obviously a pseudonym. And it turned out his real name was Howard Armstrong, I came to find out. And I assumed he was dead, and it was just half a century later that I found this record. And I asked every other record collector I knew about the record, and nobody knew anything about him. Found one other guy who had a copy of it, and he didn't know anything about it. But I wound up tracking the guy down when I was thinking of just writing an article about this guy who had died and what his life must have been like. And lo and behold, he's still alive. So he was living in Detroit, and I went out there with a tape recorder just to interview him, and with the intention to do a magazine article for this magazine I wrote for about jazz and blues. And he was such an incredible character that I came back to San Francisco, and I played these tapes for Les Blank, who was a documentary filmmaker who did films about blues musicians who lived in Berkeley. And he didn't seem interested in it. And I asked a couple other documentary filmmakers to do it, and they didn't seem interested in it, so it sort of fell to me to do it. And it was all because of that record. That was the big motivation. I was really obsessed with that record. It was such a strange and strong thing to me that it led to that film.
And the second doc about underground cartoonist Robert Crumb. I mean, there's so many extraordinary and eccentric, talented artists in the States. How did you choose Crumb?
Oh, he was an old friend of mine. We were actually best friends at the time. We're still pretty good friends, if not best friends. He lives in France now. And in the early 70s, I met his entire family. His father was still alive at that point. I spent a memorable night at their house, and I wound up, after that, finding myself telling stories about this family to different people who I knew, and I just thought I should make a film about it at some point. Again, it was like, I really liked the artwork that all three of the brothers in this family did. I collected it myself and traded or bought it from them and hung it on my walls. So that was sort of grew out of that artwork instead of a record that time. But the next film I did sort of grew out of because I fell in love with a couple lines of dialogue in the script. I just was obsessive about, like, I've got to make this film just to see somebody deliver those lines. Well, it was this film Bad Santa, and there's a line where the guy says, "Sweet Jews for Jesus," in a very disgusted way. I can't do a line reading, but he was actually disappointing in the film. Bernie Mac did it, and I was just like, oh, that's not the way quite I had him. And I couldn't get him to do it, and we were rushing along, and I sort of had to settle for what he did. He's dead now, so I can talk about it. He was a great guy, but he disappointed me in that line reading. And then there was another line where this little kid sits on Santa's lap, and he's just obnoxious pest, and he's pulling on Santa's beard. He says, do you and Mrs. Santa have any kids? And the Santa turns to him. It's played by Billy Bob Thornton, and the line in the script was, the line in the script wound up to be, no, thank the fuck Christ. And originally in the script, the way it was written, it was just something like, no, thank God. And I thought, it's not very funny. But then the Coen brothers rewrote the script. They actually inverted that line, gave it a very specific way of speaking, and that's what attracted me. There were a lot of lines like that in that film. They're very specific dialect, or they always do that in their films. The Coen brothers are very good at that, yeah.
Now, in both of your interviews, you've either asked tetchy questions or dealt with, both of your documentaries, asked tetchy questions or had very tetchy people. So, starting with Deepa, I'm interested to know how you put those people at ease. Well, Jesus, in your case, how they even spoke at all. I mean, they must have just been nervous wrecks, but they're so open with you. And with those women, that must have been really something. How did you even put them at ease, much less get them in front of the camera?
I think that the main thing with them is that I tried to spend a lot of time with them, and that didn't help at all, because it was an unusual situation. I wanted something from them, which was information. Yes, I was compassionate about their situation, but yet I needed something from them. And that sort of brought us to a place of inequality immediately. And so I realized after about 4 or 5 days that this wasn't working. And I better be honest about it. So I decided that's exactly what I would be, and I talked to them, and I said, I really need to do this, and I need you to help me do it, and it'd be really great if you were honest, and if it's not going to work, tell me now, and let's not waste each other's time. So I found that honesty always helps in these situations, instead of building elaborate, not lies, but elaborate images of why it's important, what they owe to society, how it's going to help other women, and all that is true, but it's not something that concerns women at that point who are so fragile. They react to, in fact, honesty and truth. So that was the way to do it.
And why weren't they scared?
They're scared for their lives. I mean, they're scared that the husbands who've abused them are still out there somewhere, and if when they see them on television, they might come back after them. They're scared for their lives.
Well, bravo. And with you too, Terry, I don't think either Howard Armstrong or Crown would spend a lot of time in front of the camera with those kind of questions. So how did you settle them into the...
Howard Armstrong just wanted money. He was very happy if I paid him, so... But honesty is the best policy, as Stan Laurel used to say. I went to my very first film that I made, Ghost World. My producer said, we have to go to a bond meeting. I had no idea what a bond company did or what the meeting was about, but I went along. They said, we've looked through this script and you only have 27 shooting days. How could you possibly make this schedule? And I said, I don't know. I've never made a film before. And they just pulled all their money out. That was it. I mean, they just refused to bond the film. And then I said, what did I say wrong? I was telling the truth, How should I know? And my producer said, Tony, you got to go in there and say, I can absolutely do this, and blah, blah, blah. So I did. We had another meeting. I just went in and just said that, which, was about as sincere as Mitt Romney speaking, these days, like a puppet. But they bought it. They went for it.
But with the Crumb family as well, they were all just gung-ho to talk to you?
The Crumb family, I had a very similar situation, eerily similar to what you just talked about with Charles Crumb, who was this recluse older brother of Robert's living in his room, never left his room at that point, hadn't left the house in 30 years. And I just went up to him, and he had agreed over the phone to be on camera. And then when I got to the house, he didn't want to be on camera, and I just said, look, I really need you to do this. And if you don't do this, I don't really have a film, and I just, I don't know what to do. I just really need you to do this. And he said, all right. But I did the same thing with his mother after that. She didn't want to be on film either, and a similar thing where you just, at a certain point, you just say, look, you just sort of beg them to do it or whatever you have to do.
And given the treasures that you've interviewed with your 2 dogs, do you have any other people like that in mind to do any future docs?
For documentaries? I wish Buñuel was still alive. That would make a great documentary. That was a great book. That book.
Oh, you read it.
My Last
Isn't it?
Sigh.
Yeah, I know.
It's great.
Really,
Great
guys, My
filmmaker,
Last
yeah.
Sigh, Luis Buñuel.
I always get more drawn, when I see stuff that, gets me angry that's more like, you know, raping the environment or the Gulf oil spill in New Orleans. I always want to make documentaries about stuff like that, issues, you know, less about people these days. But I always also figured, there's 50 younger, better filmmakers out there who are probably starting it right now. Let them do it, you know. I'm too old to do that. It's tough.
And Deepa, any docs on your horizon, do you think?
No, not right now.
Okay.
No, no.
Now, further to feature films, Deepa, your dramatic films have really taken the bull by the horns with the politics of sexuality and fire, and the politics of nationalism with earth, and of religion with water, and the whole magnificent shebang with Midnight's Children. And this has been quite a dangerous and challenging path for you when you didn't have to take it. So given how you've soldiered on regardless, what encouraged you to go down such tricky paths time after time? And, you know, it just got better and better.
You know, firstly, I mean, I don't think of it as being that dangerous. I mean, never ever. So let's set the record straight. Never have I ever felt that my life was threatened. Never have I felt that I couldn't do my films, that it would be difficult, but they would get done. Never was I threatened with actual bodily harm. It has been painful in different ways. Painful because it becomes an impediment to your work. And also, it becomes an irritant because you are seen through the lens of either this big heroine or this controversial film, and your films are never judged at their own merit. And that's really a drag. So I don't think of myself as this courageous person who's just going on. I just think of myself as this filmmaker who's trying to tell a story. And the story of fire is what interested me. The story of partition of India or sectarian war, whether it's Rwanda, whether it's Israel, Palestine, India, Pakistan, is what intrigues me. I want to know more about these subjects. That's why I do the films that I do. What the part religion plays in what happens to widows in India is what intrigues me. I wasn't trying to be controversial. I was trying to explore a subject. I was trying to tell a story. So I've never ever felt that, you know, I'm this lone crusader at all. I mean, I just feel like a schmuck who's just trying to make her films, you know. That's really.
But haven't your sets been destroyed? And weren't your sets destroyed, and didn't you have to shoot in Sri Lanka because it was too dangerous to shoot in India and so on?
Yes, the sets were destroyed, but I wasn't. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
it was a drag. It was really a drag. It was terrible for the producers. But the film wasn't bonded anyways, so, you know.
Probably Terry's Bonder, yeah.
Probably Terry's Bonder. And it was really, I'm not trying to make light of it.
Yeah.
It was really difficult.
Yeah.
But also, you know, in retrospect, I'm so glad it happened because I was so furious that we were actually being shut down for totally idiotic political reasons that were being convoluted into religious ones, and we couldn't do our films. It had nothing to do with religion. It had everything to do with the local politics. I was an easy target. I was a woman director. They were going to make use of it and get votes and say, look, we can stop somebody who is questioning India's morality or something. And they shut us down, and they did it violently, and it was ugly. But never at 1 minute did I feel, or David Hamilton, the producer, did we feel that we wouldn't do the film. I just didn't want to do the film the next day. I mean, I was really furious, and anger is not a good fuel because it makes you, it made me, you know, the film wouldn't have been the same. So it took the time it did. I did a film that was really irreverent and fun called Bollywood, Hollywood in between, and because I wanted to laugh. And then when I was ready to do Water Again, we chose to do it in Sri Lanka because we'd learned that we might be reused in India. But I don't feel like a martyr or anything at all. And I don't think David did. It was really ugly, but it was, if you realize why it's ugly and it's not personal, it was because it was political. It's not such a big deal.
Okay. Now, further to inspiration, Terry, you mentioned that you liked some of the music from the 20s and 30s and a lot of films from the 40s and so on. What was, and I'm interested from both of you, what were some of the films or people or playwrights or paintings or whatever that have inspired you? Not necessarily that you look at this painting and think, I'm going to do it in a film, but just generally. I
Like
love you.
answering like Sarah Palin and saying, all of them.
Yes, yes.
I can't think of any. Yeah, I like the same directors that always come up, like John Huston and Hitchcock and Fritz Lang and Buñuel. I'm not very, I don't have any big surprises there, but those were the guys I always liked.
And any painters or playwrights or Jack Kerouacs or whatever?
That were directly inspirational as far as film? I can't really say no. I mean, I like art from the 20s generally, and painting from the 20s, late 20s.
Like who?
Picasso, Kandinsky, Braque, same stuff everybody likes. Stuff that's worth $120 million of painting now, but I can't say it's had some direct influence on me in my films or anything. Yeah, I like art and music from the 20s, and I tend to like films from the 40s and 50s.
And the music might include?
Louis Armstrong, Vic Spiderbeck, and a lot of more obscure guys, and that sort of stuff.
And who might influence you, Deepa, whose work you've seen, even indirectly,
No, I mean, I've been heavily influenced, I think, by Satyajit Ray, whose work is just, again, filmmaker from the 50s, Indian, did a trilogy. Have you seen this? I mean, it's just Apu Sansar for me is one of the most beautiful films.
Yeah.
I guess the humanist directors, Desika has again played a huge part in being inspirational. But then it's Amir Costa Rica, and I think of Time of the Gypsies, and I thought, my God, this is amazing. Oh, Underground and Ugetsu. I mean, I think the works of Mizoguchi, Ozu have the Japanese masters has really influenced me, and I don't know if it's influenced me. I'm sure it has, but it's jaw-dropping. And you see something like that, and you see Tokyo Story, and you see, the camera barely moves, and the incredible, subtle choreography of actors and the emotion that's evoked is just stunning. And you see, and again, the minimal style. I mean, Buñuel, of course. But Costa Rica lately has, the earlier Costa Rica was really, is exciting. I mean, I still can see Time of the Gypsies and say, my God, this is just fantastical. Because his marriage of fantastical and music is superb for me. Yeah.
You know whose work I sometimes think of when I look at yours is Federico Garcia Lorca, especially the play The House of Bernarda Alba, which is just about very repressed women in the 30s in southern Spain with a tyrannical mother. And you've had the odd character that's been so Garcia Lorca-like, I think. But anyway, any paintings or photographers or whatever?
No, I mean, I think Terry said it.
Okay.
I mean, that I like the Beatles, but...
Now, as most of your films, or many of them have been shot in India, when you take these films elsewhere, what are some interesting differences in audience reaction from Indian audiences who really know the culture that you're doing and foreign audiences who just can identify with the issues? Have you had some interesting comments from people elsewhere or even in India about your work where others might not react that way?
Sometimes, I mean, an Indian audience will sometimes know the mythical references or will understand a piece of music, but not really. I mean, all audiences are different. I mean, I think the audiences and there is no such thing anywhere in the world where you can sit here, and I'm sitting here and I'm saying this is completely a white audience. It just doesn't exist anymore. The world has changed so radically, thank God, that, whether it's in Vancouver, whether it's in Calgary, or whether it's in Cannes, or whether it's wherever, every audience is different. And a film festival audience is very different from the real, normal theatrical audience. So the reaction that you're going to get in a film festival is, I think, very rarely one that's duplicated in the box office when the film is actually released. The time to see a film and how people react is the first day when it's shown theatrically.
Yeah.
And the film's going to be released in November, and then, then I can tell you. But generally not, It's either it's going to touch people and it's got nothing to do with what the background is, or it's not. I mean, Indians will sometimes not like my films at all. They might understand them, but not like them. And
Yeah.
that's the way it is.
No, I lived abroad a lot as a child and was always surprised in films what people thought was funny and what they didn't, and what scared them, and what, it was always so interesting to see. I mean, not that this is such a cultural thing, but Spike Lee, Malcolm X, yeah. So I was living in New York when that came out, and I went up to Harlem to watch it just because I was interested and next to me was a group of about 40 school. Who saw Malcolm X? Most people, Denzel Washington. Yeah, okay. And there's one scene in. Okay, so these 40 school children, all black, were sitting with me, and in one scene, well, anyway, all this violence was going on. The kids were like, and then in one scene, Denzel Washington kisses this woman's toes, and the kids are out of their minds, like they're all going, oh no. And it was so funny because it reminded me again of, living in the many countries we did when I was a kid and the strange things people would react to. And so I was just wondering if there were any things that people just didn't understand or really found freaky or found funny that you thought, what the hell?
All the time.
All the time. Oh, okay. Okay. Terry, what happens when you show Ghost World in Bolivia? What happens?
Nobody laughs. Nobody laughs at any of my films in foreign countries. Outside, I sat through Ghost World in Japan, and there's not a single reaction. And I sat through Crumb in Japan, and the only place where I could sense the audience perking up a little bit is when Crumb's father, who was in the Marines, appears in a still photograph in his Marine uniform, and then everybody was like, oh, they're very interested in that. I don't know. But my films don't translate well. It's all very, peculiar dialogue that's very specific to American sensibility. I don't know what it is. They don't work. There you go. I have one fan outside of America. But comedy in general is very tricky. It's very hard, even I don't know why exactly. It's a mysterious thing to some degree. You think about it in other ways, like when I'm trying to cast a film, oftentimes, they're trying to, if I'm doing a comedy or even if it's just a darkly funny drama, they always try to force, the biggest stars they can on you who have been in the latest hit film. So, if the Avengers made $1 billion, you're going to take the 5 people in the Avengers and try to force them in your film. And you just say, that guy wouldn't be funny. The guy should be, I don't know. But it's hard enough when you get your complete carte blanche to cast whoever you want. And I'm not quite sure why that is, I know that, like, in Ghost World, for instance, I cast Steve Buscemi in this part, and they really wanted a tougher guy. All the suggestions the studio had and the producers had were always like they wanted, like, Russell Crowe or, Bruce Willis or something. I said, it'd just be creepy to have this really, like, sort of man's man have an affair with this girl who's 18 years old. You wouldn't like that. I want the guy to be sympathetic, Number one, I don't like Bruce Willis anyway, so I'm not going to be sympathetic to him no matter what he plays and what he does. But Steve Buscemi had this sort of intrinsic quality to him, and he is in real life a very great guy. He's just a wonderful human being, and that sort of comes through. And so you can sort of get away with putting him in a creepy situation like that, where he's with this young girl. But yeah, no, I don't know. Comedy, I don't know. It's still part of that's very mysterious to me. Why something's funny, why it isn't. In different cultures, it's even more difficult.
Well, with adaptation, then, Deepa, taking on such an epic as Midnight's Children, how did you? And I know Salman Rushdie has the credit, but I mean, I guess you decided the format or something in advance. How would you take on a book that size over so many decades and decide what to weed out and what to put in and the narration and so on? How did you even begin to attack that and do it so well?
When Salman when we decided that and that we were going to do it, Salman's first reaction to David and myself was that I should write the screenplay, and I said no. I think Salman, you should write the screenplay, and we had this big argument. I mean, one of the loudest arguments that we've ever had about who should write the screenplay, and I won. So, and you know, Salman Rushdie is listens to reason, and and it was really important to both David and myself as we were speaking to him that the way he could be disrespectful to his own work, it would have been very difficult for anybody else to, and he understood that. And he also had the objectivity of 30 years since he'd written the book. And that made perfect sense to him. And he'd written a screenplay as well, which I thought was excellent. So he could write a screenplay. He could be disrespectful to his own work very easily. And he had that distance from the characters, which was very important. And he understood that. And what we did was that we said we'd work very closely together. And I told him that he should sit down and write what the narrative flow of the film would be in point form, and I would do the same. And you know, he went off to New York, and I went off back to Toronto, and we came back in about 2 weeks' time, and we actually exchanged those pieces of paper, and they were more or less identical. What we both wanted the film to be like, and that included what the scenes that were not there, the characters that had been compressed, and the whole chapters that were missing. And it was wonderful because now we had a foundation, or we shared the same vision, and we could go from there. Yeah. And so it wasn't just, you know, arbitrarily a decision, let's not have this character. It was what was the journey of the film, and the journey of the film that we both chose to tell was the journey of the protagonist, Salim Sinai. So it wasn't that difficult once we'd made that decision.
Yeah, because for someone who's never really written a screenplay, to take on a project that's, you know, 42 years longer than Gone with the Wind, I mean, that's really something. I mean, this is enormous. Did you ever think of doing it as a miniseries because of its length?
It was being done 15 years ago as a miniseries. The BBC were doing Midnight's Children as a miniseries. 15, I guess it was about 15 years ago, and 2 weeks before production, they were shooting it in Sri Lanka, coincidentally, and the Sri Lankan government pulled the permission from their feet, so it never got done.
Because?
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh.
No, I'm not trying to be flip.
Oh,
it's
no,
just,
I know you're not. I know, it's
not,
just sometimes you just don't know.
no, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. You know, who knows?
And was there anything that you were really keen to leave in the film, but by then the running time, anything you wish had still been in the film, but by then it was just too long?
No. The script was, the first draft was long, as all drafts of every script are, and then we you know, I felt that we had to pare it down, and we talked to each other. We were in constant you know, contact, and Salman's a very fast writer, and it was easy once it was decided about that this is the journey we're going to follow. I mean, if I wanted it to be a facsimile of the book, it would have been again a mini-series.
Yeah.
Neither of us. I wanted it to be a feature film. It felt right to be a feature film, and so did Salman. So it never was that, oh my God, this scene or that scene. You know, something always has to go. I mean, whether you're doing, you know, an iconic book like Midnight's Children, or you're doing Harry Potter, you know, it's the same thing. Yeah.
But how interesting that you first did it in point form and then got together and fleshed it out. Because I can imagine those could have been pretty different.
They could have, and then I probably wouldn't have had a film. No, it was important that we were both on the same page.
Okay, now Terry, adapting comic books.
I did that once, only did that once. I had nothing to do with the writing of that last film, Art School Confidential.
Oh, you didn't?
No, it was all Dan wrote that script.
Well, then how did you adapt? How can you take a comic book and how did you approach it?
I wasn't real interested in doing it. My wife was interested in me doing it. She liked the comic book better than I did. I didn't think it was that funny. I thought, like, yeah, it's two girls are sort of interesting. The dialogue's good, but there's no plot here either. I wasn't really that interested in getting involved, but she was trying to push me into working, you know. And I went and met Dan Clowes, who did the comic. He lived in Berkeley, and I liked him very much personally, so that was a big
Yeah.
step in the direction of working with him. And I don't know. To me, it was always trying to find something personal in that comic book. So I just added this whole thing with Steve Buscemi that was, you know, not in the comic at all. The character didn't exist in the comic, and just tried to, you know. But we spent years writing that script up and back. Both was very difficult for both of us. Yeah. Because we're both fighting for something that's very personal to us. And, you know, I told him, I said, Dan, you know, you can't expect this to be the same thing as your comic when it comes out. It's just going to be a different thing once you even, you know, regardless of me as the director, once you add actors to the equation, it's just
Yeah.
a whole different thing, yeah.
Now, Deepa, this is the question I've most wanted to ask you. I hear that in rehearsals there's a system you use with actors based on ancient Indian text. Go
Yes,
girl.
I do.
Go girl. What is that?
Have any of you heard of the Natya Shastras? No? Okay. The Natya Shastras are a Hindu Indian text that were written about 2,000 years ago. And we have about, we have 5 texts. You know, there's one on morality, one on law, one on medicine, and even, you know, to this day, a lot of Indian culture is based on these texts. One of the texts is called the Natya Shastras, which is a text about drama and how to approach drama. And it's about 3,000 pages long. And according to mythology, Brahma, who's the creator in our Trinity, you know, had created the world, and everything was, you know, all the gods were happy and everybody was having a great time. And then Indra, who's another god, came up to Brahma and said, you know, yeah, everything is kosher, but really, this is, it's kind of boring, you know, and we need something. And Brahma said, what do you think we need? And Indra said, we need entertainment. So Brahma said, that's a great idea. Yeah, so let's get somebody and let's write about entertainment. And then the gods got together and said, who should write this thing about entertainment? And another god said, Bharat Muni should write about entertainment. And Brahma said, why should Bharat Muni write about entertainment? And he said, well, he's got 100 wives, and he has 100 sons, and he has 200 daughters, and they all have children. A person who really knows what it's like to live in an extended family knows entertainment. So that made a lot of sense to Brahma. So Bharat Muni was sent off, and he started writing the Natya Shastras. And the Natya Shastras are the most complete, and any of you can get them actually. You can Google Amazon or whatever and get them. It's the most complete form on how drama, or every aspect of drama. So there is about production design, the importance of production design, the importance of the audience, the importance of what's it called, of rehearsals, and importance of makeup, story, of course. And but the chapter that really, really intrigued me was the one on rehearsals, because the approach of the Natya Shastras to rehearsals is not the Western way, which is, you know, whether it's method or instinctive acting, but it is through emotions. And according to the Natya Shastras, there are nine emotions, which they call the 9 rasas, which are, so there's anger, there's, you know, humor, there's vulnerability, there's bravery, there's, which are the other ones?
Fear.
Fear is a big one, Bhayanak. I know you aren't. You'd like to think you are. Yes. and the last one is silence. So what you're supposed to do is draw on, on the ground like big boxes. So you have squares of 9 squares. The middle one is silence. And you have the actors actually walking through those boxes and thinking of a line from their character. And they can stop whenever they want to. But if they stop in the whichever box they're meant to, let's say this is a person who is playing a serial killer, but he actually stops in the box of love, how will he deliver his line? So in that way, every actor gets to explore different complexities in his character, because according to the Natya Shastras, and I totally agree, I mean, it's 101 psychology, that there is more than one emotion that we are working on at the same time. So it's about the building of a character. And these are, the Natya Shastras are tools, and especially the Ras box. This box is a tool on how to help actors build their characters. So we had extensive workshops using this, using the Ras box and exercises from the Natya Shastras. So it's not about line reading. It's not about what's my motivation. It's not about acting scenes out. This is not what our rehearsals were, but it was rehearsals about exploration of character. So I also want to be surprised when I say action on set, that let the actor bring something that I hadn't even thought of. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but when it works, I mean, that's magic. And one of the boxes, which is one of my favorite emotions, is the box of wonderment. And that is so magical, that moment of being in that box of how do you express wonderment? And that moment is the wonderment that I love working with actors. I just live for when they give me something that's totally magical. So it helps, anyways.
And which ancient texts are involved in your rehearsals, Terry?
Wow. I never
You're
get
really
any.
in a
I never
corner
get
here,
any
babe.
rehearsal time. I never have that problem. I try to cheat in casting. I try to, at least for the smaller parts, I get, you get to read actors and give them some direction then. So I try to use that as my rehearsal time whenever I can. Usually they give you, for me, they only give me like a table reading, which is, all the actors, and usually the bigger ones in your cast won't show up for that, but the lesser actors show up, the ones not as famous show up, and they sit around a table and they literally just read the script with no emotion. That's how they're directed to do it. And I often say to the producer, well, let me have them do it with some emotion. No, you don't want to do that. It's not how a table reading's done. It's like, whatever. So you sit there and you watch them just talk through the script. I never learned a thing from that. I tell them, I don't want to have a table reading. Forget it. The first one I witnessed, I went outside in the hallway. I was looking for a noose to fashion to hang myself. It was so awful. And Thora Birch came out, who had just done the table reading. She had a great time doing it because she was trying to be funny through the whole thing, and just ruined every line that she spoke because she was trying to be funny. You're not supposed to be funny here. And she said, how'd it go? It was great, right? I said, yeah, it was great. I'm going to hang myself now. It totally shook her confidence, which is, great thing for actors. But I didn't know. What did I know?
Okay, so no ancient text. Okay. So with casting, Deepa, I always think when, seeing your films that you've just had so many, many millions of interesting people to choose from in a place like India, not because it's so big, but because drama, whatever it is, Mahabharata, whatever, has been going on for so long, and there must be so many. How do you even begin with the casting system there? I'm sure you have your favorites, but aside from that.
You watch a lot of movies and you know what's going on.
Yeah.
And there's a very active theater in India. So I do tend to keep up with that with the National School of Drama in Delhi. But it's not just India. I mean, I know what's happening with Indian actors or Pakistani or Asian actors in New York or in Vancouver or in Toronto for that matter, or even in London. The lead of Midnight's Children is an Indian who I first met at the Yale Drama School. So there's a Emerald who is in the film is is played by Anita Majumdar, who's a young actress from Vancouver. I think
Is
she
that
grew up.
Zulfikar's wife?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you know, so they're people from all over. Mrs. Gandhi is played by Sarita Chaudhary, who's from New York, and there are many actors from India. It's just knowing that they're there. The community of Indian actors is who aren't into pure Bollywood is actually very small.
Yeah.
You know, and there are many actors in Midnight's Children who've never acted before. Their first-time performances. It's about observation, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And Terry, with you, you know, I think two of the greatest castings of the past 30 years was Linda Hunt in The Year of Living Dangerously and Steve Buscemi in, or how do you pronounce his name? Buscemi? Oh, in Ghost World. I mean, it's just one of those Brando and Streetcar performances. You know, who else would possibly have played that? Did you think of him right away, or did you cast, or how did that come about?
I couldn't think of anybody else for that part. Yet, like you say, I still to this day I can't think of anybody else who could have played that. Really, I don't know. Believe me, I was worried about it at the time, but yeah, he was terrific. You know, can't think of anybody else who could have done it. In
He was so
retrospect, yeah,
terrific.
right.
So that wasn't the role that you were going to cast Mickey Rooney in, right? What's the Mickey Rooney story?
My wife will be happy to hear this for the 98th time. I was telling David Hamilton on the walk over here that we're talking about casting and casting agents, and oftentimes when you cast, the casting agent will come in someday and say, could you see at 11 o'clock I have Donald Sutherland's coming in. I said, what part is he coming in for? And she said, well, just as a personal favor to me, could you see him? I said, I don't want to see him. I'm not going to hire him. He's completely wrong for the part. I think he's a fine actor, but he's going to be angry because I don't hire him, and you're wasting my time. She said, just do it as a favor to me. They always do this. And you're like, okay, so and it's always a disaster, And so one of these times this happened was Mickey Rooney was coming in. Like, Mickey Rooney? The guy's 95 years old. What part does he want, He wants to play the Santa's dwarf elf in Bad Santa.
Oh, man.
I said, well, okay, have him come in, I just, he's already there. He's been in the waiting room for 2 hours. I said, all right, please bring him in. Mickey Rooney comes in. Guy's a terrific actor, right? I don't know if you've seen a lot of his films, but he's had a career going back to 1922. He's been in over 400 films. He comes in with his headshot and his filmography, and he hands it to me. It's like the sweetest guy, and I feel so bad. I'm like, clearly not going to hire him. He's too old, right? And he wants to read. I said, no, you don't have to read. He said, no, I really want to read. So I said, okay, we'll do a scene. And at this point, the film was being produced by Bob and Harvey Weinstein at Miramax, and they were insisting that every single person who auditioned has to be videotaped. So they got to bring out the video camera and put it on a tripod, which is even, I can't think of anything worse as an actor to have to do that. And then my producer's sitting there with me, and, we're looking, and so he starts doing this scene. And, every other word in Bad Santa is some profanity. So he gets to every profanity he comes to, he just says blank. And then he goes, and I say, well, wait a minute. In the film, you really have to say fuck or whatever the word is. He said, oh, yeah, I'll do it for the film, but I don't want to do it today because, your producer's a lady. I said, well, she says, I don't mind. He said, no, I can't do it today. So I was trying to think of a way to let the guy down easy about it, and because he really wanted this part. And I just said, it's written in the script that this guy has to be 3'6" tall. You're too tall for the part. So he said, gosh, the first time in my life I've ever been turned down for being too tall for a part. So he was happy.
Oh, God. So since this panel is about the future, and we have 3 minutes to talk about the future, Deepa, I was very excited to see that you were thinking of doing something on the Komagata Maru. If you are, would you like to say just a little bit about it, or is this still...
Yes, I mean, I would like to do something on the Kamagata Maru, but I don't have plans right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I won't even tell you what that is. And Terry, are you cooking up something specific for the future?
I'm trying to get another film off the ground now, but I don't want to talk about it. It just really jinxes the whole thing. So it's really hard to get money these days for a film. Yeah, very tough. So I don't even want to talk about it, but wish me luck.
Okay, we wish you luck. So Any questions from you all? Yes.
Why is it so tough to get money, Terry? I mean, you're a
My
established
last film was a
director.
flop. Didn't make money. You're only as good as your last film is what after I made Bad Santa, it made $80 million and only cost $20 million. I had like offers like you wouldn't believe, and I thought they'd never end. It lasted about 6 months, and then that was it totally. And I ran into Woody Allen. We had dinner. He was in San Francisco shooting a film, and I've known him for a while, and he said, I made Midnight in Paris. It grossed $160 million worldwide. Not a single person got in touch with me after that film to offer me financing for my next film. But, in his case, he could, he never shows the script to anybody, never tells him who he's going to cast, and he might decide this next film's going to be a drama about the Holocaust or something. So, I probably wouldn't give him money either, but me, come on.
He's always got the same producer, too, it seems like, in most of his films.
He's had for a long time,
Yes, here. Sorry, you just have to wait a sec for the mic. Thanks.
There it is. I have a question about anti-heroes, and specifically about Bad Santa. When you have a character that, and I loved it, by the way. I thought it was outstanding as a comedy. You have a character that's literally beating up children. How do you prevent the audience from turning on them? Like, what conversations were had in terms of the structure, the design of this character, so that the audience is with him?
The original scene in the script was that he's on this hill and he's shoving these kids. And it just wasn't working at all. And I said, let's just have him punch these kids. And the producers were just totally up in arms, said, you cannot have him punch a kid. You're totally out of your mind. And somehow I managed to shoot it that way. And then as soon as they saw the test screen and people laughed, it was considered, genius then, or something ridiculous. But no, I was trying to make this guy sympathetic, and I don't want to get into too much of this because it went to a DGA arbitration, but I had final cut of that film, and it was taken away from me, and I just couldn't win in a courtroom. It would cost too much money, so the studio had their cut of their film, which they released theatrically, and eventually I got my cut of the film out on DVD a couple years later, which of course nobody ever saw, and it's out there, and the 12-year-olds seem to hate it on the internet anyway. They like the theater, the theatrical version. But my cut of the film, whether you like it or not, is at least a very consistent film character-wise. And my goal through the entire film was to make this character very sympathetic. And so, yeah, he swears and he punches kids and he's, having anal sex with women in the dressing room at the department store he works. But through all that, I tried to keep this in this crazy world, being what it was, of my own crazy reality. I tried to have some rules, and the studio just immediately tried to bend those rules, and like the test audiences, of course, they're basically half the audience is going to hate that film from the start because there's a guy in a Santa Claus outfit who's drinking and having a cigarette, and they're offended. They're good Christians, And part of the reason I even made that film was just a big fuck you to religion, to organized religion, which I just hate. It's just like responsible for some of the worst ills in the world, and that's a part of it anyway. But so they all hate the film right away, and then the rest of the audience, there's a good proportion that thinks, oh, he's being mean to the little kid, Yeah, well, at the end of the film, just be patient. It'll be okay, And he doesn't hate this kid. He sort of tolerates the kid. The kid's a pest. But, he doesn't hate the kid. He's not being really mean to him. He's just sort of being pestered by him is the intention of it. Oh, yeah. The kid was really good. That kid had never acted in a film before either. That kid saved my life. He showed up we did a extensive casting search through all of North America and saw about either on videotape or in person 5,000-6,000 kids, and they kept bringing me these cute little Disney kids, and I said, no, it's got to be some kid who has some substance, he doesn't necessarily have to be fat or anything or big, but he has to have something about him that can sort of be impervious to this, or else it's just going to be too tough to watch, and it's going to look like child abuse or something. This kid just had that quality, he had this quality to him that came naturally, so he didn't really have to act, he just had to sort of be there, the biggest problem with him was his attention would start to lag you know, he would stop pestering Billy Bob Thornton as much as I wanted him to, and the direction I gave him was, I said something, because he just didn't care about Billy Bob Thornton. He wasn't a fan of his. He didn't know who he was. And I said, who's your favorite movie star? And without a moment's hesitation, he said Adam Sandler. And I said, okay, so pretend he's Adam Sandler. And then he was just all over him, you know, pestering him to death.
Yes?
I'm just wondering if either of you have any words of inspiration to the younger filmmakers starting out.
Give it up. I need all the money. You can't have any of the financing out there. No, you know, you know, what served me well, or not so well as some people would think, is just to do, you know, something personal to yourself, something, you know, that means something. Otherwise, you know, there's easier jobs in the world, like you say. It's the most stressful, horrible job in the world. I sort of like the end result of it. I like the thing to exist and say, oh, here's a DVD, you can put it in, this moment's preserved forever, but
It's very tough.
it's a tough job, jeez.
Perseverance. If you're a sucker for, I was going to say perseverance is important if you're a sucker for punishment. Yeah, yeah. Oh, this is the best thing that I think Spielberg has ever said, actually, because I'm not a big Spielberg fan. But he said, wear comfortable shoes. I thought that's funny. And it's so right. Yeah.
Now, who has the mic?
I do.
Okay, speak.
Hi, I have a question for Deepa and Terry. I was just wondering if you have any advice on
Stand
directing.
up so we can see who you are.
Yeah.
Thanks.
My question is for both of you, if you have any advice on directing children and teenagers in films.
My advice was actually, yes, I do. And it's pretty much similar to what you just said, is that what I found with kids is that, you know, don't reason with them. There's no point, you know, kids don't respond with reason or telling them what their motivation is or why they should feel a certain way. I had the same thing with, and I worked a lot with kids, was the last time with Midnight's Children, and he was just really not responding to the guy who was playing his father. And I said, you know, which movie star do you like? And he said, Shah Rukh Khan, who's like this big Bollywood star. And so I said, yeah, pretend he's, you know, Shah Rukh Khan. And it was perfect. And, you know, so it's about talking with kids is really, if you want them to do something, it's find out what they like, what they don't like. And if you want them to do something that's negative, just tell them about what they don't like. And it really works.
I just try to avoid working with kids in the future and teenagers. They're not as good as actors. I like working with really trained stage actors, like British stage actors. That's just a dream, because those guys never have egos. You know, a guy like, right, a guy's like Jim Broadbent or something. It's just like, is that what you want? Is that, you know, yes, that's pretty great. Could you do it another way too? And it's like playing a Stradivarius violin. You get the guy to do it like 13 different ways. You know, as much time as you have, he'll do it, and it's always great. And kids, yeah, it's just a struggle. It's a mess, you know.
Oh, okay. Where's the mic?
Right here.
Oh, great.
This is a question for Deepa. You're one of my favorite directors.
Thank
number
you.
one. I
Thank
really love your work. Curious, which actor or actress do you connect most to in your film? Like, what character has resonated and stayed with you the most?
Different ones in different films. I think it's just there was a little girl in water called Chuya, who has always stayed with me. The actor, I mean, this was the first film. She's not a trained actor, but just her desire and her concentration and her focus. She was really, really unusual. Almost a, yeah, yeah. So she has stayed with me. And I think in Midnight's Children, the so-called villain of the piece, Shiva, played by this actor called Siddharth, I think will continue to haunt me because he did such a magnificent job. So it's a bit, it isn't necessarily sometimes the actors that stay with me aren't necessarily talent has nothing to do with being a good person. And usually many talented people are real assholes. And it's true. I mean, yeah, but somehow there are some actors who even can transcend that. And that's wonderful. Shiva for me in Midnight's Children is definitely one of those, and the little girl in Water.
I can't wait to see Midnight Children.
Yes. Oh, yeah, okay.
Just a quick one. I wanted to find out a little bit more about how you get the best performances out of your actors, especially when you don't have a lot of rehearsal time. So things that really work, and maybe one or two things that really haven't worked at all that you really don't recommend. For both of you would be great. Yeah.
I do, one of the stipulations, and we make independent films. We haven't made films for big studios, and David Hamilton is a producer who really gets it. And I find that it's to have rehearsal time is imperative for me, because we don't waste that much of time with the whole crew hanging around on set then, trying to figure out what we really want to do, or an actor trying to, especially in Midnight's Children, where there are 12 principal roles. Can you imagine the time it would take on set if people are trying to figure out why they're saying what they're trying to say? So rehearsals are absolutely imperative, and it's much cheaper. You aren't there with the whole crew, and actors. The other thing is, I've found in my experience that actors love rehearsals. So they will give you a break and they won't charge you and stuff, at least the ones we work with, and have given us a huge break at times. And you spend that 2 weeks of intense rehearsals, and it pays off. It really does.
The biggest trick I found that helps me is to give an actor some business. Give them something to eat, or something to, go here and, do the dishes or peel a carrot or something. Very helpful to me. Not very deep, I know, but no, I never have time for rehearsal. So when we're shooting, if they seem stiff or nervous, I give them something else to do instead of just focus on their lines. That seems to help. And I try to rehearse while when there's a lighting change. It's it's half an hour, 45 minutes to turn the lights around. Then we have some time, but yeah, no, it's crazy. You get no rehearsal, and that's the most important thing about it, is the performance. To me, it's just crazy.
Yeah. Who has the mic now? Okay.
Hi, this is for both of you. Obviously, you're both directors and writers. For independent filmmakers who do everything themselves, including the catering, what other aspects of the production is it really important for you guys to have a hand in? Editing, music, production design, costume, things like that, or how much are you allowed to have input in?
Well, I try to have input in everything, especially editing. I don't know much about production design. I'd like to learn more. Not quite sure how you learn about it. But yeah, no, I'm very hands-on with the editing. I'm in that editing room every minute of the day. And I just don't understand, like when I hear about, like the last editor I used, I worked with Oliver Stone. He just left and went on vacation for 6 weeks and said, show me when I get back. I was like, I don't understand that. But yeah, it's very specific to me. I'm very picky in the editing room, but at the same time, I remember the last film I was editing, my editor had some relatives in town and some friends. He said, do you mind if they just stop in? They've never seen a film being edited. I said, it's very exciting. They'll last about 15 minutes before they're out of here. He said, let them come in and watch us work a little bit. I said, okay. And I said, you know what? We'll have a little test for them. And we had like 5 people in the room, and I said, so here's like five performances by John Malkovich, 5 responses of this one particular couple of sentences he says. And one, to me, was, of course, the best performance. And we'll just have them look at all the performances and write down the number so they don't influence each other, and pick and they were all different performances. They picked what they thought was the best one. So I don't know. I get, part of that has to do with they didn't know what the film was about either. So it's not really a fair contest. But I try to have, in music, I'm very involved in music because I'm a musician as well. So I try to get as involved as I can.
Where's the next one? Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Deepa,
sorry.
sorry.
No,
I was hoping to hear from her too as well.
Of course.
Yes, I think the editing is extremely important, and I too am very involved in the process. I mean, I'm not there till for the assembly, So that's when I take my break from the film, and usually we have the editor on while we're filming, so he's assembling as we're filming. Because if you're doing it on location, we're in Sri Lanka or somewhere far off, and we want to make sure that if we have anything to pick up, we do it now and then. But once the assembly is done and sort of the editor gives me his rough cut, then we sit down together and we work on it. That's very important. The other, and design is also something that I'm very concerned about, the look of the film. But I find myself spending a lot of time now also on makeup and wardrobe, because that traditionally is something that directors aren't supposed to interfere in at all. And I found that, especially in the cases of where I have Western makeup people or Western wardrobe people doing Indian faces, that it really does need a lot of work. And because the skin tones are different, and it's important that a sari, in fact, is worn in an authentic manner. And so those kind of details are extremely important to me. So I found myself spending a lot of time with, even initially, with hair and makeup. It's a good thing to do, I think.
I thought of this interesting thing. When I did Ghost World, I had no experience with wardrobe or any of that production design, anything directing either for that matter. And I found it very difficult to communicate with the heads of these different departments of what I wanted, including the cinematographer. And I said, look, the easiest way I can explain, I'm trying to set this, I'm trying to make this world, this ghost world, this way I see the world. And the only way I can even talk about it is out in the real world, not in this room. So let's go to the mall. There's this Beverly Hills Mall right where we were, and we'll just go and we'll sit there and we'll talk about people walking by. We sat there and watched people coming down the escalator. And I said, okay, this guy in the blue, that guy, that's the perfect guy to be in the film because, the way he's dressed, he's this really out of shape fat guy, and he's wearing this jogging suit, and he has this silly hairdo, and I don't know, we just went, and that was really helpful to them. Yeah, that was very helpful. And then, when the woman who did the wardrobe for Steve Buscemi, she just decided to base it on what I wore. And that was the easiest thing. But that was sort of funny for me. So. Steve didn't like it.
This is for Terry. Is it true that Jack Nicholson was offered Bad Santa?
He was, yeah. And the story I read was that he wanted to do it, loved the script, and had just signed on to do some film with Diane Keaton, Something's Gotta Give or something. No, it would have been interesting. He would have been good. A little old, but he would have been good. Yeah.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Hello? Yeah. I got one right here. Pardon me. I was just wondering, when you were first starting off making a feature-length film, how did you guys end up assembling the dough? Sorry if that was kind of like short and blunt, but just as a beginner, I find that I have these great scripts that are just piling up, but I'm having trouble finding people who actually are serious about,
Well, in
putting
my
the
case,
money.
I just found a producer, and I don't know a thing about raising money for films. She did it all, so.
Yeah, I don't know a thing about money. I mean, I know something about money, but I can't. I would be a terrible person to try and raise money. So what you do have to do is find yourself a producer, somebody who likes one of the scripts that have piled up and says, I want to help you make it. So, it would be really good if it's a lawyer or it's somebody in the business and knows money and has a passion for movies. You can't do it by yourself. There are producer directors, but they're very rare. You need help.
Thanks.
And one more, yes?
Have you ever had the experience of having an actor say that they do not want to deliver a line like you want them to, and how do you get around that?
Yes, sometimes. I mean, they said that, I don't think I don't remember them saying, I don't want to do it like that, because that's such a diva thing to say, and I don't like working with divas, so I don't cast them. Uh, but uh, but somebody has at times, and then yes, I remember. Yes, this was earlier on. I was doing a film with Jessica Tandy. It was her last film actually, and before she died, and there was a line that her character had to deliver, which was about, I think it was quite long, and I wanted her to move while she was delivering it, because it was about a paragraph long. Not a line. It was a speech, in fact. And she said, I refuse to. So I said, what do you mean? She said, I'm not going to move. I'm going to stand still, and I'm going to deliver this. And I thought this would be disastrous. I mean, it really needed her movement. It needed the camera to move, because it needed that energy. But she just absolutely refused to. So I said, okay, we'll shoot it this way, the way you want to, but I really feel that you should move. And she said, absolutely not. So I just called it, I said, let's take some time off. And in that movie, because it was a big budget movie, we had Winnebagos and stuff and honey wagons. We don't anymore. And so she went off into her big honey wagon, and I was hanging around the set, and I think it was in Georgia or Savannah or somewhere. And I thought, what am I going to do? And then it suddenly hit me. It's about communication and talking to certain actors in certain ways which they will understand. And I'd worked with her for about a month, so I knew a few things that she would respond to. So I went to her and I said, Jessica, the reason I want you to do this is you have a choice. Either you can be a queen who's holding court, or you can be a queen who wants to walk amongst her people. What do you want to do? And she said, I want to walk. So she did it. So it is about, sometimes when you hit that moment, it is about how are you going to communicate, because it's such a waste of time to get into fights and semantics, or the clock is ticking. It's 125 people hanging around watching, and some of them hoping that you're going to fall flat on your face, and others cheering you on. A set isn't usually a congenial, wonderful place. There's a lot of pressure. So you have to think about communication. And I find that in directing, a lot of it is about what you're going to say, or what should be said to a certain person. Yeah. I'm sure.
I just always try to be as prepared as possible, and then that way you can sort of have something to fall back on, but then you can also stay open to things that happen on the set. Like the last film I made, John Malkovich was playing an art professor. He's teaching this art class in college, and I had this very elaborate, staging worked out the night before. They stayed up working on this little diagram that I made. And I said, okay, so I'm thinking we'll do this, and you start over here, and you deliver this line, you start moving in this direction. And he said, for this scene, I think I would like to, I'm very tired. I think I'd like to just play the whole scene sitting under the table. And I thought, oh, here comes the pissing contest with the actor. He's going to be a dick and see if he has more power than me, But he wasn't. He was actually being very sincere. So I was open to it. I said, all right, well, let's do your way, and then we'll see what happens, And it was great. It was like one of the greatest scenes in the film. It got cut from the film, not for any other reason, but it seemed somewhat redundant in its writing to another scene, so it wasn't really needed. But it was pretty great scene, and he somehow pulled this off. It was weird, but it's good to be open to it,
Now that I'm joking. Sorry. This is the end of our panel. So thank you, Deepa, and thank you, Terry. I'm just going to cough again. For joining us today. No, it's the water's problem.